Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Different Strokes for Different Folks, to find common ground and take it to the next level with David Clarke here on Blog Talk Radio. Each week, the show will encourage you to keep an open mind and prepare to open the door to new understandings. We will have an exciting array of diverse guests who will point up the fact that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. Now your host, David Clarke.
Welcome to Different Strokes for Different Folks, where we will indeed be finding common ground and taking it to the max level. I'm your host, David Clarke. I'm a spiritual adventurer, and I suggest you become the same. When you keep an open mind, not only will you open the door to new understandings, but you'll come to see that despite our seeming differences, we're all basically the same. This way, you can see where you can find common ground so that you can relate rather than compare yourself to others. Now, tonight, it's my pleasure to welcome a person known as Jessie Ann Nichols George. Jessie Ann is a coding interpreter who has authored 6 books on her own and is a collaborator on the international multiple times bestseller in multiple categories, Embraced by the Divine, the Emerging Woman's Gateway to Power, Passion, and Purpose. Her work is founded in the principles of compassion and how to use it to bring joy to all areas of life, so that you can live your passion and manifest a life filled with joy and fulfillment. Her work also encompasses the divine flow and interaction of the masculine and feminine principles in life and relationships. Jessie Ann hosted her own international radio show, The Code Connection, for 5 years. She has created the Genesis Clearing Statement and is a traveling presenter. As a coding interpreter, she helps people understand the flow of their energy in this world and how to bring that into divine alignment, using that flow in limitless ways throughout every area of their life. Her work utilizes approximately 39 years of experience teaching and working with clients, blending Eastern and Western philosophies through over 50 different modalities. Jessie Ann is a 13-plus generation spiritual healer, energy tuner, life, relationship, spiritual and wellness coach, holistic, and natural lifestyle advisor. She is also a 13th-plus generation Druidic practitioner, honoring and appreciating the harmony of all things. And so, tonight I'm going to welcome a woman who identifies herself simply as Ann. She is a walk-in to Jessie's life, and Ann, you are live. How are you tonight, Ann?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, David. It's so great to be on your show.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. It's been a while since I've had Jessie. I was looking back, and I did indeed have her after the accident. It was March of 2018, so it's been quite a while. And there have been a lot of transitions in her life, and the main transition is that she has exited this life and you have entered. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So I know that is something that is a little bit different for people. It's not every day that people get to meet a walk-in, I would say. And it's one of those situations where coming in as a walk-in, I mean, it would be like somebody jumping into a sports game 3/4 of the way through the game or halfway through the game and I won't say never having played the game before, but, having to jump in and play with a bunch of people you don't really know and having to just take off and ride with it. So it's definitely a different experience to be here.
Well, I'm curious. We talked for a while this afternoon, but I'm curious what the experience is like for you coming into a human body and having people expect that you're somebody else other than who you actually are.
And that's a very interesting challenge. I had a very unique situation coming in as a walk-in. I was coming in, which normally if I'm going to come into an existence, I'm coming in under very extreme circumstances. That's part of who I am. And I'm coming in under very intense circumstances. A lot of times a walk-in, if they're going to come in, they come in and it's a very short period of time and then they leave. That was not necessarily going to be the case in this situation. So I actually spent about 2 months sharing body with Jesse so that I could be as seamless as possible in this transition. And I think that made a big difference in this particular case. And it was, on one hand, very easy because I had that time. On another hand, once she had left the body, and particularly that afternoon, the next day, waking up, and it's almost like there's a void, it's like having somebody around 24/7, and then all of a sudden they're not there. And we certainly experienced that in death too, but having to adapt to hearing people call me by a name that is not my name, which I've gotten used to because it's what this human body is. And so again, I'm very, very grateful I had this 2-month period to step in and share body because it gave me a chance to really get to know people. It gave me a chance to ask Jessie questions. It gave me a chance to know who the key players were in her life and to know what those people were like and to have a feel for them. So there was probably only less than a handful of people, literally, that knew that I was sharing body with Jessie. She had expressed it to just that few of people that were very, very close to her that she knew would understand and that she didn't want it to be such a huge shock to them. She wanted them to know that transition. And that was helpful, I think, for both of us so that there was somebody of a support system there. It's very, very rare that a walk-in gets to have that kind of time and that kind of opportunity.
Well, are you outing yourself tonight in a sense?
In a sense I am. I kind of outed myself with the 2019 book when I wrote that. Well, I didn't write it. Jesse wrote most of it. We co-wrote a good portion of it, and I completed it. And I outed myself at that time. And yet the interesting thing is that a lot of people, I think, just kind of blew it off. I don't think that they really grasped that there was this shift of souls in the body. And what's very interesting is that people that knew Jessie well can tell the difference. It's kind of like identical
I can tell
twins.
the difference.
Because for some people, they look at it and they think, well, you look the same, kind of. I mean, now I've gained weight, so I don't look exactly the same as she did. But they can look at it. It's kind of like identical twins. They look the same, but they're different. And I think, like you've just mentioned, and some other people have mentioned, I've had some people that didn't even know Jessie, and they would go back and they would watch some of the videos that she had done, where we put out the monthly videos, and then they watch the ones I've done, and they're like, I can absolutely tell the difference between the two of you. So,
well, your energy is very different. You have a different. I don't know that it's a different cadence, but your voice sounds different to me, and I don't think it really struck home to me until after we'd gotten off the phone earlier today. And I realized, I was mourning for Jessie. And it's nothing personal directed against you, Ann. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I feel honored that you've agreed to be on the show tonight. And I respect you, and I find the whole subject to be absolutely fascinating and mind-boggling at the same time. So I
think that what you mentioned, David, is something that was also a challenge for the people in Jessie's life, because they did go through that mourning period, the people that really knew it, the people that saw it, and that realization. I think that is natural. Anytime somebody moves on, whether it's a situation like this or whether it's a physical death, that mourning period is going to be there. And I take no offense to that whatsoever. And I think that that's a very natural process that has to be honored. And I knew that as this came out for people around Jessie, and for some people they never knew. We just didn't discuss it. It wasn't their type of topic. They wouldn't have gotten it. And it just, so I had to remain as her for quite a while. And it's just been since I left the job that she was in at the beginning of the year that I've been able to embrace being more of me and not having to be called by her all the time. And no offense, because Jessie is an amazing soul. She's an incredible soul, full of compassion, full of heart, full of love. And, she just had an essence about her that made people love her in many ways. And so I had to give people that time, that space, and see who would be willing to accept the shift and who wasn't there and who couldn't accept it and who accepted it in some ways but kept calling me Jessie. So I'm very understanding there, very open and flexible and understanding. Well,
you've had some real challenges since you have walked in, since you've I'm stumbling to find the right word for it. You shared the body with Jessie for 2 months, and then when she transitioned, I was reading in the Code Journey about some of the challenges that you had to face yourself after Jessie transitioned. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, when I came in, I knew there was going to be a lot of cleaning up to do, if we can say that. And what I mean by that is that Jessie didn't have children, so she's cleaning up a lot of family patterns. Anytime somebody is not bearing children, not giving birth in this world, they tend to be the ones that are responsible for cleaning up family energy patterns. And she, because of a lot of her generosity and kindness, got walked on a whole lot. And bullying was a pattern that has been in her life quite a bit throughout her formative years and throughout workplace years. And, it's that kind of story of somebody who's too nice in some ways. Not that I believe you can truly be too nice, but in being nice, you set yourself up to be taken advantage of. You don't stand up for yourself. You don't speak your voice. And
I understand.
So I had to deal a lot with situations in her work environment with supervisors that were bullying her, people that were taking advantage of her. Of course, at the time of her passing is also when her sister passed, and there was a lot of manipulation in the family that had unfolded along the way, and in that death. And so I was trying to wrap up things at work. I was trying to I ended up having to go like a couple of levels over the district people's heads to get things taken care of. I went through a lot of sabotage by people on the work field. I went through then trying to deal with the trust that was in place from the estate from when her sister passed, finding out that her sister had collapsed the trust that she was entitled to and put it all in her own sister's name. And then in that
Excuse me for interrupting.
found out that
I just wondered, when you were saying that she collapsed the trust, does that mean that she collapsed it such that Jesse was not going to be a beneficiary?
That was the attempt that was being done, and so she had taken the original trust that was left to her and Jesse by their mom and collapsed it all into the sister's trust. So it basically was cutting Jesse out, except for before her sister could totally do that, her sister passed away. But that was the course that she was on. So, there was an entitlement there to that trust. But then I had to go into battle with the niece over everything because the niece had been told by her mom that Jesse was to be cut out of everything, and that the niece then tried to manipulate me out of that share of the trust. So I'm dealing with, throughout 2019, it just started off with having to deal with all of these bullying patterns, the work environment, the harassment there, the sabotaging, people trying to get me fired there. And then I was dealing with health issues, and I was dealing with trying to resolve this trust and and having somebody try to manipulate me out of the trust. Well, I knew in this whole process, and one of the things was the codes are such a beautiful guiding system, and they're so great. And I knew that one thing I had to do was make a shift of residence, and I had no idea how to pay for that. But I know that if I hadn't made this shift in residence about a year and a half ago, right before some of it was already in place, but right before I had to deal with a lot of the trust stuff, that I probably wouldn't have gotten anything. And it wasn't so much about the money, and I want to make that really clear. It wasn't just like I'm going to go after this money, but it was an aspect of, again, standing up for Jesse. So a lot of my time here over 2019 was really putting some people in their place and letting them know that this body's not going to be taken advantage of. And this body is not going to be bullied or pushed around or shoved around. And she did way too much, and she had given up way too much for these people who were trying to cut her out of things. And, so she had to fight. I had to fight to the end on this. And it took all the way through the end of 2019 to resolve it.
Oh, my. Wow. Well, I was going to ask you, what kinds of responses did you find that you were encountering from people that probably were blown away by the way that you reacted or acted on, if you will, on Jesse's behalf?
I think it was very unexpected, for one. Like in her work situation, nobody expected me to jump to regional people to resolve things, because I had already seen the workings. So I knew even going to the district level, the hands were dirty. And there were dirty hands on the district level that were encouraging people to write false statements against me to have me fired. So I went straight over their head, for one. So they were so used to, Jesse just being quiet, taking it, so they didn't really know what to do. And because I always stayed kind of one step ahead of them, I had that ability to see where they were headed, what they were going. I had this natural timing to just show up and overhear something that was going on so that I could kind of cut it off at the pass, so to say. And, as a result of that, when their plans to try to get me fired didn't work, they were just all in disbelief. They couldn't believe that they couldn't get this passed over. They couldn't believe, with this district person on their side that, and encouraging all of this, that I wasn't going to be fired. Everything was dismissed without an investigation against me at all. So they kind of started to realize, I guess we're going to have to deal with this person. We're going to have to do this. And things changed because their plan to try to get me fired backfired. They all got watched on. I can kind of relate to Trump that way. He's always one step ahead of everybody, and everything they pulled backfired on him. I used it against them. So, yeah, it was a game changer. And they realized, and matter of fact, a couple of people that were the big instigators and everything left. They transferred out, and they kept trying to get me to transfer out. And I'm like, no. Why should I have to drive another 20 miles, each way? Because I was already driving 42 miles each way to work. And
really,
it's like, I'm not going to make a farther drive because you don't want me here. It just, and same old story. The person who works the hardest, does the most, they get attacked because they're not goofing off with everybody else. So,
right.
So that all kind of really got put into place. And then I started having some physical challenges on top of that, and that kind of laid me out. It set me back 2 months in the book for writing last year. And then I had to get into getting a lawyer to deal with the trust. And the niece was, again, she's very good at manipulating. She was, thought she was going to get her way, and I didn't back down. And so she just decided she wasn't going to talk with me and forced me to talk with lawyers. Well, the lawyer handling the trust didn't want to talk with me either because I wasn't playing his game. So I found a lawyer that represented me without any charge, just by making a couple of phone calls. He didn't have to get into actually filing anything, but just those phone calls was enough. So they realized I wasn't playing around, and I think that's been the big shocker for a lot of people is, no, I had to come into this life. I came into a situation that was rough. I came into a lot of tough things to deal with. I have important work with the Code Journey work. I'm responsible for keeping this in integrity and for getting this information out and to bringing this wisdom into the world. And I don't have time to mess around with these games, honestly. So I think it was a big game changer for people to realize I'm just not going to put up with it.
It sure sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah, took them by surprise, didn't it?
It really did, and it's been, very, very good for my human self, because one of the things that I vowed to my human self when I came in is we are in a partnership. Okay? I might be coming in as this new soul to you, but we are a partnership, and I'm not going to let you be taken advantage of. I'm not going to let people bulldoze over you. We're going to close these patterns out, and we're going to move on to a better life. And so I have spent a lot of last year, even through all of these challenges, building that trust with my human self, letting it know I'm going to take care of it. And that makes a big difference. I think we can all work on making that agreement with ourselves. And when we come into that relationship to do that, our human self comes on board in a whole nother way. It starts to shift the fears out of the mind. It starts to change the way we handle things. And it would just be the same as if a child came into your life that had been abused over and over and over again, and you step into their life and you know, they got to learn to trust you. But once that trust is there and they know that they absolutely can trust you and you're not going to hurt them, then they can totally surrender into working with you. And I think that's just such a valuable lesson for any of us to take away.
That's a part that's confusing me a little bit, because you're talking, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not specifically talking about the Jesse part of the equation. You're talking about the human self that you have become. Am I capturing the essence of what you're saying?
Right. I mean, we have a human side to ourselves, and we have our soul side. And the human side is the form that we move in. But that human self, because of the brain that we have, it holds the programming. You know, can it really function without the self? Yeah, it can in a sense, because it's kind of like a robot, you know, in a way. And whether that human self chooses to be conscious of the soul energy that's present in it, that's a choice. And so we have people certainly in this world, they have no real concern about that. And sometimes they might feel it, sometimes they might wonder about it, but they don't necessarily, they just go on living life in this kind of monotonous way with no thought about anything beyond the physical world. But those who have chosen to make a relationship with the soul that is in their body, then they become aware that they are something more than this world. They become aware that there's something else there, and they're not just focusing on the programs of the world. And of course, the human self operates in this very mental, physical, logical way for the most part. And so when it's got a soul in there, that's where we start to see whether there's heart, whether there's compassion, whether there's these other components there, whether there's, you know, people that are working with intuition have to have some sort of connection with their soul self beyond just the physical identity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that clarified it.
Yeah, no, that really does help. I guess I'm going to back up for just a moment, because you talked about the experience of coming in, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that what I recall you saying was this is not the first time you've walked in for somebody.
That is correct. And I think that in some ways, David, we may see more walk-ins coming in. You know, we already have some variations as far as transhumans going on, and transhumans, I mean more half artificial intelligence, half human aspect. We have more of that already being developed in our society. But I think we're also going to be seeing some more walk-ins coming through because of the times we're in and what a critical turning point we are in this earth, in this world right now, particularly, I would say, over the next 4 to 5 years, probably closer to 5 years of time, because of the shifts, the transitions, the importance of our choices right now. But walk-ins, again, there's all different, just like there's all different types of souls with different purposes, different meanings. They will come in from time to time, and they're never going to come in and just boot somebody out of a body, so I want to make that clear. Usually a walk-in comes in due to a traumatic situation. So that situation, for example, might be a car accident, or it might be, somebody falls into a coma or something and comes back out. But there is never a question. Like when somebody is a walk-in, they know 100% they are a walk-in. There's no question about it whatsoever. And sometimes that's just a short period of time, because in a trauma situation, the soul may go ahead and leave a body, or it may have an exit point to leave, and yet the body, the physical body, may not be ready to go. There may be a contract for that physical body in there. Now, when I step in, it's usually a much more critical situation like this, where it requires a specific knowledge base. It requires handling something like the codes. In Jessie's situation, in order for her to do some of the work that she came here to do, she had to be born in this body. There was not the anticipation of certain things that might eventually take her out of this body. There wasn't the anticipation of the impact of Orly's presence, and those that end up reading the Code Journey will understand about Orly and the impact that was going to have on her. And even though she continued to try to pursue through. Now, she was under a situation, Jessie was, that she had to take off because of the way the sister was, because of the dark energy that had infiltrated into the sister and the things that the sister was involved in, which were very dark. And that would have brought a lot of attack, that would have brought life threats, that would have brought a lot of torture. And at the point that death was happening, Jessie was already living in a code environment. And the house was very wonderful. The person she was living with, absolutely wonderful, okay? If you just look on it on paper, it was absolutely fine. But when you look at it from the code perspective, there were death codes there. There were strange accident and fatality codes there. And there were numerous times while she was living there that she had semi-trucks come across the road at her.
Yeah.
So it just, to have those types of things going on, and then the emotional state where she just had never really gotten over Orly's passing and the impact that had on her, and being exhausted and worn down, and the constant harassment and everything that was going on at work, and then trying to bring the code work forward through the Code Journey book, and to have to deal with attack on top of that would have been too much. So we had to get her out before Jessie's sister passed. And as it turned out, we managed to get her out. It was on a Wednesday and in the afternoon, and Jessie's sister passed less than 48 hours after that. So the reason we would have to get her out in this kind of situation is because as long as she was in the body, the sister has a right to attack this body in a sense. Certainly her love would have done a long ways to protecting her, these different types of things, but with all that she had been through and all the trauma she had been through, and her body was struggling, it was just too much. And so in order to protect her and keep her safe, and see, once a soul leaves the body, for the most time, it's going to step back into its soul self. It might take a little bit of time. It comes back in and it remembers who it is. It remembers its light. It remembers its goodness. It goes into reverie where it reflects on the life that it had, and it gains and learns and takes that information in and so on. And yet there are some souls that, depending on what they pass under, the influences that they pass under, those souls can kind of be trapped in a dark space, or they have a lot of anger because they weren't able to do something, and because of the dark energies that they were in, they don't get to that purity of their soul, and they get wrapped up in being trapped on planes that they get busy wanting to make that attack. And that's not a thing that we really normally should be scared of, honestly, because most souls do pass right over and they don't get stuck. It's not very many souls that remain and come back with this kind of attack. So having me in the body, once the sister passes, she would realize and get to know that Jesse's not in this body, which means she can no longer attack it.
Her spirit, once she passes, is that what you're saying? Once she did pass?
Right. Once Jesse crossed over, and then the sister crossed over. So once the sister crossed, in the physical body, the sister couldn't do a whole lot. But once the soul is free from that physical body, there's basically no limitations for it. So it can play with things. It can toy things. It can, do all kinds of things. And we see this, people talk about ghosts. We see this, that's a soul that didn't cross over. They didn't choose to pass on, or they got lost along the way, so they're trying to get attention, to get help to move on, that type of thing. So, with her sister passing on, as soon as she passed on, she would realize there's no way she could come after this body. There's no way that she can make an attack with me in it. So, could she make some things difficult? Yeah, there's some of that, but not really. It's kind of like foiling the plans in the situation. So in order to keep Jessie safe, we had to get her out before the sister, because if she went after the sister passed, then the sister can be there ready to attack.
Okay,
so
I understand.
Jessie had to get out before the sister passed. So
let's back up a little bit. Okay, so you came in a couple of months before and shared the body with Jessie. And what was the impetus to come in at that point in time? Was that a soul contract with Jessie, or how did that work?
It's one of those things, because Jessie is part of my Magi team, and the Magi come from the multiverse, and we're very focused on compassion, and we're focused on wisdom, and we come in really to help a culture or a world to make the progressions that they need to make to help them along the way, and that is part of why we would incarnate at some point. Most of the time we stay in the multiverse. Most of the time we are making decisions about things and trying to work with how we can help progress people in a loving way. So we she didn't know it so much, but we kind of dropped inklings. We knew this was going to be a very rough life for her. She, some of our Magi team did not want her to incarnate, and that was just out of safety and protection and love for her. But it was something she insisted on doing, and she did. And so we kind of just stayed on call for her a good portion of her life, in case she needed it, in case she got into too much trouble, so to say, too lost in the material world. But, we didn't really start stepping in more and more, taking a more careful watch until Orly took a huge chance to come into her. Not come into her, but to meet up with her.
And
because
can you just,
that love is
for
just
a moment,
epic.
can you just advise us who Orly is so that the listeners won't be confused? This is the second or third time you've referred to her. So I thought we'd better interject and say who Orly was to Jesse.
Sure. And I know this is a lot for people to take in because there's so much to this story. But Orly is Jesse's, in essence, Orly's is Jesse's twin flame soulmate love match. That is the soul love. And so when there's an incarnation, because one has to normally incarnate into one gender or another gender in this particular realm on Earth, there was kind of there was a separation that happened because they didn't have a full merging. Like I have a full merging with that soul energy, so it's not separate. So I incarnate as a whole, but Jesse didn't have that because they had not made that merging yet, her and Orly. So Orly was the love from the multiverse that is hers, and Orly incarnated as a cat. And Jessie had to make a choice in Utah when she was living there because at that point she was looking at going on the road full time. She was having to make some very tough decisions, and she knew it was a game changer. And basically the short version of the story is Jessie ended up rescuing Orly, and their journey, they took 1.5 trips around the U.S. together, traveling, and it was in those journeys that Orly was actually helping Jessie remember our language in the Magi's of the codes, and doing that through the experiences that they were having during that time. So they had about they had 11 months together. Orly came in as an older cat, starved to death, really tough situation, but they did travel the U.S. together. They did full-day hikes together. They had an amazing journey, and it was during Jessie's grieving of Orly, when Orly passed while she was on the road and in those travels, that she started realizing everything. She started realizing, she always knew this was, her love, but it really sank in as she started to reflect on everything and bring it all about. And so this love that they share is so epic. And when we talk about things in the multiverse, it has an impact on every existence everywhere, every universe everywhere. And their love in the multiverse is epic. And so this is part of why it was so critical for her to get back safely. And Orly was there to take her home when we made this transition in there. But along the way, we dropped little pieces from, we had her change her name. At one point, we pretty much knew, and the Magi team, that we were going to be coming in. She didn't know at that point. And we had her change her name from her middle name from Anne to On, and that being my name, knowing that I would be the one that would be coming in. And then it wasn't until after she was in Maine that, and the last few months that she was here, that she started sensing there was going to be a walk-in, and that was not long after the accident, the car accident that almost killed her, happened. So, yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. So, that did I forget something or jump something in there?
No. You didn't. Thank you very much for clarifying. I was just looking back. I did 4 interviews with Jessie, and she transitioned to the name On. It looks like in somewhere between February and November of 2016. I have her billed as Jessie Ann for the first interview I did with her, and then Jessie Ann later that year. So there was the Magi, of which you are all part of the same team, if you will, had some awareness that Jessie might need a walk-in at that point in time. Is that what I'm deducing?
Yeah, we got very watchful when Orly went in, and that really was in 2014, the summer of 2014. So we were really, really watching things in 2014. I think by the time that 2016 hit around, we knew it was very likely, because, of course, we could see a lot more of the pieces going on that she couldn't, being in the physical incarnation
right
at that time. So we were kind of laying the groundwork in case it needed to be done.
Okay. Well,
so that way it makes it kind of an easier transition in some ways, for me to step in as On with her already having that name change. And she liked it. She just didn't completely understand, why that. But, she knew it coded well. She knew it, had some favorable energy to it and those aspects. And, but yeah, we were laying the groundwork. Again, not 100% certain if it was going to be needed, but laying the groundwork in case it was, which it turned out to be. It was needed.
What was it like for the two of you to be inhabiting the body for those 2 months together? What kind of communication transpired between you, and what kind of understandings came into play? I hear you laughing, so there must have been some humor involved too.
Well, okay, I'm going to relate it like this. If anybody has had a conversation with themselves in their head, that's a lot like what it was. And so a lot of that time was teaching me what she was dealing with, how things were done here, who the key players were in her life, what their roles were in her life, and, who kind of was who, so to say, and what was expected and what was required and how things worked. But, of course, I sometimes can have a little bit of a sarcastic nature to me. And, of course, I, as you may notice, don't hold back quite as much when I'm thinking something. I kind of just say it, and I don't really worry about whether somebody's going to be okay with it or not sometimes. I'm a little more open that way. But we would have these conversations and back and forth, and I would see some things happen, and I'm like, I just can't believe you're putting up with this. Or I would say, really, and I would make some snide comment to her and make her laugh or chuckle a little bit, but then she would come back and she's like, we can't do that here. So we had some fun in that way, but it was also a very intense learning period. Because there's so much to take in. I mean, basically, it would be like if somebody had 2 months to show you everything about their life so that you could master living as them.
That's a lot to take in.
That's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
So
What was? Go ahead.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
No, I just wondered what Jesse's understanding was about what was going to happen in terms of your ultimate role.
You know, I think she was relieved it was me that was coming in versus somebody that she may not have known as well.
Okay.
Because she was very particular, and it was like, she kind of let us know, we're not going to, I'm not going to let anybody in this body. Like, it can't just be anybody. You can't just drop anybody into this body with this that's going on, with the codes, with, like, you can't just put anybody in there. It has to be somebody that truly understands this. So, of course, that's a picky piece there. And she wanted to make sure that everything was done. But she also had a lot of nervousness during that time. Like, could she get everything taught to me? Could she show me everything? And at some point she just had to kind of let go a little bit and trust that I would figure it out. And I would draw on her a little bit telepathically to try to figure something out, like, okay, you got to show me. I'm not sure where you put this. I'm not sure where to go look for this. And so I think that was part of it. But she was feeling very nervous about being able to get out in enough time. She was feeling very nervous about all of the circumstances that was surrounding the sister's health and the sister getting ready to pass, and all of these components, and the sister wanting her to go back there. And we actually had an argument about that, because for her to go back and be with her sister at the time of passing, it's very hard to get into that whole story, but basically there's a lot of manipulation, and as I mentioned, there was a lot of dark energy going on at that time. And she would have had to take a transfer with her job. And then her job, she had been told by a supervisor that she would not be allowed to transfer back in, that they would not have a place for her. And so basically it would mean losing her job. And that was something she couldn't afford. If she had gone back, there really wouldn't have been much she could have done, because the physical body was deteriorating to where it was hard to walk. She couldn't do stairs well. I mean, there's a lot of physical challenges going on. And the sister wanted her to come back, and I knew it was a trap, and she did too. She knew it was a trap. And I just had to put my foot down and say, no way. We're not going. We're absolutely not going. Because with the sister, it wasn't an aspect of, I really wish you could be here, and I love and I care about you, and it would mean a lot to me, and this and that. It was an entrapment situation. And the sister was over-medicating. It's very likely that, she was trying to kill herself, basically. And if Jessie had gone, that suicide, she was trying to set it up to make it look like Jessie would have murdered her. So that was not okay with me. And what the sister had said to her was, I want you to come help me die. Not I want you by my side, not that I would, wish you could be here because I want sisterly love and, none of that.
Right.
The sister had just been vicious so much along the way, her whole life, really. And I'm like, this is a setup. We're not going. Not going to happen. And so we had some intense conversations. We had some fun. We had, it was a very intense period, because it was just so much learning, so much to take in, to be able to step in and make it seamless.
Well, I guess the only other question I have connected to that point in time is what was Jesse's what did she have any reservations about going, or how motivated was she to go at that point in time?
You know, I think there were a couple of components. I think that she just longed for Orly so much, like remembering that love and having that time together. Like you can't get that love out of you once you've remembered it. And that's all she really longed for, was to be with Orly again. And and their parting and their going was just incredible to watch. It was beautiful to watch it. But for her, she was kind of in this, the codes gave her life. Working on the code journey she loved. She was so happy to be able to come to Maine and have Maine be where she could live. And she originally was going to go up into Canada, and that didn't work out. And she managed to find a code alignment that would work for her in Maine. And so that's what she did. But even among that, I think that she was ready to go because of the experience with Orly. And that's part of why we were watching it so carefully, because when you remember who you really are, and when you remember what your soul is all about, and when you have a love like they have, to experience it and then have it ripped out from you is, and there were many ruthless pieces that I could spend hours talking about involved in that passing of Orly and what was surrounding that. And it just was, it was devastating. So I think really she would have seen anything through that she needed to see through, and certainly being in Maine made it easier for her. Working as a writer with the Code Journey was easier for her, but she was ready to be with Orly. She didn't want to be without Orly.
Oh, well, thank God they are reunited. I'm thinking we're coming up on the hour mark, and I think what I would do is save the discussion of the codes and the code journey to our next show. We are going to do another show on May 22nd, and we may indeed return on May 29th. We'll see what ground we can cover the next time around. But you've been talking several times about the codes, and we certainly need to spend some time on that, quite a bit of time. And so I'd like to save that for the next show as a starting point.
I would love that. I would absolutely love to provide that sharing and talking about the code journey and what the codes are about and how much they're just changing lives. They're changing lives all over the world, and what this book is about. And I put out the book every year. I create a new edition because it's a daily guidebook, and it's really a way to help people maneuver life here on Earth.
What's the best place for people to get a hold of the Code Journey?
Go to my website, compassioncodes.com, and you'll see a tab on there that has like products, and there will be one for the Code Journey on there. And it's got the links on there right now. The ebook version is marked down to $6.99. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of leeway to do any kind of markdown through Amazon, but the paperback right now is through Amazon. I do have a bookstore in Maine that I deal with sometimes, and a bookstore in Vermont that will carry at the Pyramid in Vermont, in Rutland, Vermont, and then the Raven Collections LLC here in Norway, Maine, will carry it. And I'm hoping to have it out in the fall, September, October range this year. And I'm hoping to start getting this, if everything continues to go well, out into a lot of other bookstores around the country.
Perfect. Well, the 2020 version shares a sketch of Jesse's life and also talks about many of the things that Ann has mentioned today about the walk-in experience. And then there is a section on the codes, and then there are the monthly and daily aspects of the book as well. So I encourage people to get a hold of the Code Journey for 2020, and it's subtitled A Daily Guide for Life on Earth. And 2020 is the year of rebuilding and restructuring. And so with that said, I welcome this evening. I thank you so much, Ann, for joining us. And I will look forward to speaking with you again on May 22nd.
I definitely look forward to it, David. Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. So once again, we come to a close. Let's pause and reflect on the idea that we are all united through the diverse tapestry of our individual gifts. There is no real thing as separation except in our own minds. We are each unique expressions of the ultimate source of our beings. We are spiritual beings having a human experience who can and will have a spiritual experience when we let it be. Good night, everybody, and God bless. Good night, Ann.
Good night.